Good morning, everyone. We're actually just gone good afternoon now, and we're just going to give it a minute to let everyone join, and then we'll get started. Hello, everyone just joining. We're just going to give it 1 minute for everyone to join, and then we'll get started with today's webinar. Lovely. It's 1 minute past 12, so we'll get right on. Thank you everyone for joining today's webinar on fundraising strategy fundamentals. Today on the call, I've got Sahil, my colleague, and Caitlin, who will be sure to introduce herself a bit later. And of course, I'm Bethany from Big Give. And before we just go on to the day's session, just going to go over some general housekeeping. So just switch slides, please. Thank you. So you'll see at the bottom of your Zoom panel a chat function. Please click on that and feel free to introduce yourselves here, share ideas, and also let us know if you have any issues, of course. And you just want to set that chat box to everyone, and then everyone will be able to see your answers. If you do have any questions throughout the webinar, we will be addressing them all at the end. So please do use that Q&A box that you'll see at the bottom of your Zoom panel. Please make sure to add your questions in here so we don't lose them in the chat and we can get to them. There'll also be a live poll throughout this session, so you should see that pop up on your screen when it's time, but please do pop up a message in the chat if you don't see that for any reason. And of course, you are muted in today's webinar, but you will have the option to, of course, message in the chat, as I see some of you already doing, and of course, add your question to the Q&A box. And there's also a show captions button at the bottom of the Zoom panel if you need to have captions for any reason. And finally, this webinar is being recorded, so you will be able to share this with colleagues and review the webinar again after the session if needed. But without further ado, actually, I realize I've got one more slide left, so let me do that first. Thank you. So of course, we're all here for the Women and Girls Match Fund, and this year we're really trying to spread light about, how important Women and Girls charities are in helping women and girls to bring about positive change in their communities and in their own lives. And of course, this real match funding incentive is important for you guys to highlight throughout that campaign week to ensure that you're letting all of your supporters know that this is a great opportunity to support your charity. And of course, the campaign dates, as you should all be aware, are the 11th of October to the 18th of October. And that's when you'll see that donate button appear on your campaign page. And of course, all donations must come through that Big Give campaign page in order to be matched during that week. But we don't want to focus too much on process in today's session. If you do have any questions about, how the match funding works or bank details or all of that admin-y stuff, please do join us for our Ask Us Anything webinar happening this Friday, and we'll be going through all of that. Of course, if you can't attend for any reason, that webinar is also being recorded, so you're able to review that next week if you want to, but you can also send us an email at hello@biggive.org and ask us your questions there. And now I can pass on to Caitlin.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Beth. And hello, everyone. Welcome to Fundraising Strategy Fundamentals. Please do introduce yourselves in the chat. This is going to be a super interactive webinar, even though I can't hear you. So yeah, drop your name, your organization in the chat, and welcome. Who am I? Why am I talking to you today? I'm Caitlin. I'm from IG Advisors. We're a strategy consulting firm, and we work with the philanthropy, business, and nonprofit sectors for social and environmental change. And yeah, I'm Caitlin. I'm your facilitator today. We are going to have a short Q&A segment at the end, but if for any reason you don't get to ask your question or questions come up for you later down the line that you want to ask me, anything fundraising related, then you have my email address. You can scan the QR code for my LinkedIn. Please feel free to reach out. So your trainings. So you have two fundraising related trainings for the Match Fund. The first is Fundraising Strategy Fundamentals, which is happening right now. So welcome. Hopefully you're in the right place. And we'll have a second training together this Wednesday, where we'll be talking about how to craft compelling content. So we'll be thinking about messaging for women and girls, how to use your social media, your email communications, etc. But in terms of today, we're currently introducing you to the session. And we're then going to move on to defining some key targets for your Match Fund campaign. We're then going to do some mapping. So we're going to map your assets, map your networks, make sure that you're leveraging all of the resources and wonderful people at your disposal for fundraising success. And then we're going to go on to thinking about how you're prioritizing the work that you're doing for your campaign. So very much aware that for some of you, maybe this is your first Match Fund campaign, maybe you're a one-person fundraising team and you're having some concerns about how you're going to manage this. So we're going to be sharing some top tips for that. And then, as I said, there'll be some time for Q&A, and we'll wrap everything up. So that's the plan. And by the end of today's amazing training, you're going to have set yourself targets for your campaign, and you'll know who your key audiences are. You'll have had a chance to explore your assets and your networks, and you'll know how to use them for fundraising success. You'll know how to prioritize your campaign, manage your time efficiently, and you'll have a chance to ask all your burning questions. So that's a lot of me talking, but I want to hear from you. So obviously, this is likely going to be some sort of crowdfunding campaign. So what's the first word that comes to mind when you hear the word crowdfunding? So in the chat, drop one word. What does crowdfunding mean to you? What comes to mind? Oh, and yes, we'll be sharing the slides from today's session. Ella, thank you for the question. Community. Okay, crowdfunding meaning multiple donations. This is great. Network, supporters, momentum, individuals. Yes, okay, I love this. So something that you're all picking up on is raising money from a large number of people, getting in multiple donations. And also I love inclusion. So we're thinking about people who can give at different levels, right? This doesn't have to be exclusive to the top givers in your networks. And I love the word momentum as well. That's a really good word. So yeah, as we said, crowdfunding is about asking a large number of people for their support. And it does mean that you can welcome smaller size donations. Often people make the use of online channels for these campaigns, but still think about your offline channels. So our kind of key tip for any fundraising campaign is go where your donors are, go where your audiences are. And that will probably also include offline. And also time bound. So there's like a pre-campaign slot, which is right now, where you're doing your training, you're preparing your resources, you're scheduling your posts. Then there's the live campaign. And then there's also post-campaign, which a lot of people neglect, but it's really important to think about what do we want to happen after the campaign? How are we thanking our supporters? How are we continuing to build on those relationships that we've made? So we have a little poll for you that should come up on your screen. And we'd love to know how you currently feel about your campaign for the Women and Girls Match Fund. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how confident are you about your Women and Girls Match Fund campaign strategy? Are you number 1, not confident at all, send help? Are you 3, think I know what I'm doing, but still have some questions? Or are you 5, super confident, let's go? 10 seconds to cast your vote. Okay, should we see the results? See how people are feeling? Okay, so a lot of you kind of feeling in the middle, that you kind of know what you're doing, but have some questions. So that's great. Hopefully you'll have a chance to ask those questions today. But also a lot of people kind of not feeling too confident, which again, just to reassure you, is completely fine. That's why we have these trainings. So hopefully you'll be feeling a bit different by the end of the session. Okay, we're going to head into the actual content now, and I'm going to take a sip of water to prepare myself for this. So, whenever you're planning a fundraising campaign, we always recommend understanding what success means for that campaign. And that can be, what does success mean in the short term? So in this case, by the end of the Women and Girls Campaign Week, so by the 18th of October, what do you want to have achieved? But also, what does success mean in the long term? So a year from now, what have you done with all of the new relationships that you've built, the skills that you've gained, maybe the buy-in for these kind of big give campaigns? Where do you want to be in a year's time? And who are you looking to engage through your campaign? So we're going to be answering or thinking about all of these questions today. So we're going to start off with a little exercise. So picture this, and feel free to close your eyes for this one, actually. So the campaign has just ended. It's the 18th of October, and everything has gone brilliantly. How do you feel? And what have you achieved that has made it so worthwhile? And we've included a little box with some suggestions. So the obvious one is we raised a ton of money, but there might be other kind of signs of success, right? So people are more aware of our brand. There's more internal buy-in for crowdfunding campaigns. Maybe you've developed your skills and confidence with online fundraising. Maybe you've created new communications materials that you can repurpose, or perhaps you've challenged kind of problematic narratives around the communities you work with. So success can mean many things. So I want you to spend 30 seconds, and if you feel comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes and just think, the campaign has ended, everything has gone brilliantly. How do you feel? What have you achieved that's made it so worthwhile? So 18th of October, how are you feeling? And when you've got that image in your mind, I'd love to hear in the chat a couple of words, maybe what have you achieved? How are you feeling by the 18th of October? Let us know in the chat. Excellent. Yeah, that's a really great one. So understanding how these campaigns even work. For many people, it is your first campaign, so that's a really great goal. New supporters, more awareness, more members, regular donors. Oh, so that's interesting as well, thinking about if people are donating for the first time, how are you converting them into regular supporters of your work? Improved writing skills, profile. I love that feeling coming through of the feeling of accomplishment. Learning, yes, that's so important. These campaigns, especially if it's kind of the first time you've ever done them, it can feel daunting, but also there's an opportunity that comes with that, right? To learn. Feeling of achievement, feeling relieved. Yes, I love that one. And also boosted by how many people care about the work. I think that's excellent. Okay, so we know how we feel and what success looks like by the end of campaign week. Same exercise now, but it's been a whole year since the Women and Girls Match Fund campaign ended. So again, feel free to just take a second, close your eyes if you feel comfortable. It's been a whole year since the campaign ended. What have you achieved since, thanks to the campaign? So again, just 30 seconds. And when you've had a chance to picture that, I'd love to hear in the chat, what does that look like in a year's time? Okay, so now you've had a chance to think, would love to hear in the chat what success means in a year. So we have someone saying the pool of donors and organizational profile has continued to increase. And you're getting longer term support from donors at all levels, which I think is a really good point, right? One of the things that you all identified about crowdfunding is you can include and bring in supporters who give it a range of different levels. Reaching a wider, more diverse audience, more regular monthly donors, continuing that engagement with donors that you've built during campaign week. I love that. Confidence for future crowdfunding. Yes, I love that. That's such a great one. Okay, so I want you to hold on to all of these wonderful visions. Wow, I feel excited for everyone. Like, yeah, so looking forward to a year's time and seeing all of these hopes and dreams come true. So obviously we have all these hopes and dreams, but in a lot of cases, maybe you're a one-person fundraising team, or maybe there are a few of you in the team, but you're working on a whole bunch of other relationships right now, and this feels like an extra piece of work for you. So I'd love for you to just take 30 seconds out of everything that you just imagined success to look like. What are your top 2 to 3 priorities? So 30 seconds, note down on a piece of paper, note down, I don't know, on your Microsoft Word document, on your Google Docs, your top 2 to 3 priorities for your match fund campaign. Oh, and I love what someone's just put in the chat about a board that's more engaged with our fundraising. That's a really interesting one. Okay, give you a few seconds. Amazing. So hopefully you've now identified your top 2-3 priorities for your campaign. And these are your guiding stars. So whenever you're trying to make a decision about, is this task or activity worthwhile? Is this a useful goal or target? I really recommend that you come back to these 2-3 guiding stars that you've just identified for yourself and ask yourself, is this going to help me achieve these guiding stars? And if the answer is no, then maybe you want to reconsider whether it's like a top priority action for you. Okay, so we know what our hopes and dreams look like, but how are we going to get there? So a really great way to prioritize the work that we're doing, stay focused, is to set SMART goals. So SMART goals are realistic goals that are going to help you to achieve those guiding stars that you've just identified for yourself. They can be financial, and there probably are going to be some financial ones because we all want to raise money this campaign, but also non-financial. So a lot of the goals that you all just shared in the chat, they're not necessarily financial. They play into the ability to fundraise and raise money, but they're not necessarily financial. You might want to think about goals for the short term and the long term. So what do you need to achieve between now and before the campaign starts versus what do you need to do during campaign week and what do you need to do after campaign week? And keep it SMART. So SMART means specific. So if your goal is just raise more money, that's not very specific. It's not going to help you stay focused. It's just not very helpful. So make it specific, attach a number to what you're trying to achieve, make it measurable. So how do you know that you're achieving your goals? How do you know that you're making progress towards your guiding stars? Make sure you can measure it. Attainable. So we want to have hopes and dreams and come up with really exciting visions for success, but we need kind of achievable stepping stones to get there. Relevant. So as I said, if it's not related to your guiding stars, is it a useful goal? And time-based. So yes, is it something you need to do within the next week, within the next month, within the next year? When do you need to do it? So some examples here of good SMART goals are unlock X amount of ring-fenced match funding between the 11th and the 18th of October. Gain X new followers on Twitter between the 11th and the 18th of October. Produce one new promotional video between the 15th to the 30th of September. So they're all very specific. Assumedly, we're going to assume they're attainable for whoever has come up with these. They're measurable, they're relevant, and they're time bound. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to come up with some goals. And as I said, think about your guiding stars and how these goals are going to help you to achieve those visions of success. So I'll give you 1 minute. And as you come up with goals, I'd love you to share at least one with us in the chat. So your time starts now. Okay, we have some goals already coming through. So I love the increase MailChimp signups by 10%. And maybe think about when do you want to have achieved that by? When are you going to start working on it? When do you want to have achieved that 10% by? Have at least one new corporate supporter donate through the Big Give platform during campaign week. I love that. Unlock £5,000 of match funds. I love that. That's really specific, really measurable. Gain first-time supporters. That's really, I'm sure, like a goal that quite a lot of people will share. And maybe think about how many supporters feels attainable. Yeah, maybe think about attaching a kind of number. Have 2K pledged from corporate supporters before the campaign starts. Love that. And yeah, I love as well thinking about when are these things happening? What do you need to do before your campaign, during campaign, after the campaign? Something that people sometimes forget about is the work that you want to put in afterwards to maintain those relationships, encourage more regular giving. Oh, I love the thank you document template idea. I think that's great. And again, maybe you want to think about what audiences are you targeting that thank you document to, or what platforms do you want to be using it on? Is it an email thank you? Is it social media posts? Okay, I'm loving all these. And we're going to move on, and hopefully I know that you've had 2 minutes, so that's not a lot of time to set goals for yourself. But this is hopefully a useful taster. So we really recommend after this 1 hour session, we'll share the slides, go away and continue thinking about this and set some goals for yourself and your team. Okay, so we've thought about success. We've thought about how we're going to set ourselves goals to meet those visions of success and achieve our guiding stars. But we also need to think about audiences a little bit, because as you all mentioned at the start, there are lots of different audiences and types of supporters that we could be leveraging for our campaigns. So just highlighting 4 key audiences to think about here. So first of all, and actually a couple of things to say about all of these audiences. So first of all, no matter who you're talking to, the match funding incentive is really, really, really valuable. So make sure that you're always mentioning the fact that their donations will be doubled. And then the second thing to think about is, even with foundations, with corporates, with businesses, it's people sitting behind these organizations. So at IG Advisors, we always recommend a relationship-based approach. So think about the people, think about their interests, what motivates them, and think about building relationships that way. So whistle-stop tour of some audiences you might consider. The general public. So general public, there are lots of us. And the general public can support your campaign in so many ways. So it might be through donations, but it can also be through spreading the word, sharing your social media posts, holding their own fundraising events for your campaign. So there are lots of ways to engage them, and crowdfunding, digital fundraising, community fundraising events all tend to work really well with this audience. So a really great audience for this type of campaign. Obviously, the kind of flip side is the general public tends to give at lower levels. So you need to be reaching a lot of them to raise the same amount as you might raise from donors who are able to give at a slightly larger level. The second audience to think about, major donors. So by that we mean individuals who are able to give at high levels. And high levels can mean different things for different organizations. So it could mean £100, it could mean £1,000, it could mean £1 million. It means different things in different contexts. But some of the advantages of this audience are they can give large quantities of money. Their money is their own, so they have flexibility, they can be responsive because they're making decisions about their own resources. One of the challenging things about this audience is we often get asked, can you just go away, do some desk-based research, access databases of kind of wealthy donors? And those lists just don't exist as much as they do for foundations, for example. So to identify major donors, there's often a lot of network mapping involved, looking on LinkedIn. And we're going to be doing some of that later in this session, so don't worry. And it can be harder, they don't necessarily share their priority areas on websites, for example. So it can be harder to understand what their cause areas of interest are. And then moving on to foundations and corporates. So this year with the match fund, you're not restricted to people who can donate through debit and credit card. You can also get donations through BACS transfers, which means foundations and corporates might be interesting to think about. So foundations, they can give large, they can give multi-year, they tend to be more transparent about their giving. So it's easy to do a bit of desk-based research and work out who gives to your cause area, when their application deadlines are, etc. The key thing to remember is that ultimately it's people that work at these organizations. So don't forget about building relationships. That's really important. And then corporates tend to be kind of driven a bit by business interest as well. Often when people think of corporates, they think of money, but there are also lots of ways that corporates can support beyond financial resource. So is it volunteering time? Is it space? In-kind donations. And one thing to be aware of is that even organizations that seem quite big, they don't always have the largest amount of full-time staff time dedicated to the social impact side of things. So that's interesting to think about as well. So there are lots of different types of donors that you might be considering for your campaign. Match funding incentive, really, really important to stress. And then within all that, who are you focusing on? So are you focusing on new supporters, your current supporters, getting them to donate again? Or are you focusing on lapsed supporters, so people who donated to you in the past and maybe trying to work out how to get them back involved and engaged with your work? And we always recommend asking yourself, What do you know about them and their motivations? How are you going to tailor your approach, your messaging, your ask in response? And where do they engage with you? Where are you going to reach them? And on Wednesday, we will be doing a session all about communication channels, social media, email. So we'll be coming back to that question. And donor personas can be a really helpful tool for thinking through some of those questions. So we're not going to practice using this tool today, but we did a webinar last year where you did have a chance to go into this tool in more depth. So you can access last year's trainings. But basically the whole point of a donor persona is thinking about a current or a dream donor that you want to engage and asking yourself, what do you know about them, their interests, their motivations, where they engage with you? And using that to build out your messaging, what's going to resonate with them, what kind of event or other touch point might be influential. So I'm going to take a little sip of water, and I can see people dropping questions in the Q&A box already. And so please do, because at the end of the session, we're going to do a Q&A with everyone and dive deeper into all of those. Okay, now I've had a quick breather. We're going to go on to mapping. So there are two things we're going to think about mapping in today's training. The first is your assets, and then we're going to go on to network mapping in a little bit. So asset mapping, we recommend this all the time. It's one of our absolute favorite tools when thinking about your strategy. And it's basically about identifying what are our strengths, what are the resources, the people that we already have that we could be using for our campaign. So it's about making your campaign more efficient, about making your life easier, and also just making sure that everyone who, might be keen to get engaged can get engaged. And we recommend thinking about 4 key areas. So first of all, identity and strategy. So what is it about your organization, your brand, your approach that you might want to leverage for your campaign? So for example, I don't know, maybe you employed this really innovative approach or a very tried and tested approach, and you want to stress that in your messaging. The second category, people and relationships. So this could be yourself and all of the skills and the experience that you should be using to contribute to your campaign, but also think about your wider team, your trustees. Someone mentioned wanting to leverage their board. Also think about your supporters, think about, and not just financial supporters, but people who engage with your content on social media, for example, your volunteers, who might support your campaign in some way beyond funding. Comms and collateral. So this is all about your communications, your website, your reports, your newsletters. What resources do you already have that can be repurposed for this campaign? Do you already have really good testimonials from the communities that you work with that you want to share on social media, for example? Do you already have a really great branding? How are you going to use all of Big Give's templates? Thinking about all of those tools that you have that you can make the most of. And then also the final category, environment and spaces. So this could be physical spaces that, for example, maybe you want to hold some events to raise money for your campaign, but it could also be online spaces. So your website, the Big Gives platform, your social media platforms, your supporters' social media platforms. What spaces do you have that you could be leveraging for your campaign? So this is a really, really fun exercise, and it normally feels very uplifting to kind of identify all of the amazing resources we already have. So would love you to take, maybe we'll spend 1 to 2 minutes, just quietly note down as many assets that you can identify in each of these 4 categories that are going to help you with your Women and Girls Match Fund campaign. So we'll spend until 36:37 past on this. So just a little bit of silent working for you now. But any questions about the exercise, drop them in the chat. And I'd love to hear, once you started creating your list of all the amazing assets you have, what has most surprised you? So when you've been doing this thinking, have you had any aha moments where you're like, I should definitely be using this as part of my campaign? So let me know in the chat any revelations you're having. Just a few more seconds on this. Hey. Are we having any revelations? Or maybe not even revelations, just any useful kind of notes to ourselves about the resources that we already have that we want to be using. Oh, I love that one. That's such an interesting one about identity. So the history and the story behind the organization itself and the kind of mission and why you do what you do. I love that. 60 years of campaigning for women. Wow, that's a great, that's a really great asset to be able to draw on in your messaging and all of that knowledge and kind of credibility. Anything else anyone wants to share? Yeah, I feel like it's a really interesting one to think about all of the people that might want to support our campaign. And that can include volunteers, it could be our trustee board, the communities we work with themselves. There are so many interesting people who might be really passionate and want to support us. And especially if you're a lone fundraiser, it can feel like, oh, how am I going to run this campaign on my own? Whereas actually we have all these networks to draw on, and we're going to be doing some more work on that in a second. Yeah, quotes from helpline users. Love that. Okay, so hopefully that I do recommend taking this activity offline. If you have a team, do it with your team. And just make sure that you're making the most of all of the materials, the people, the parts of your identity that are so powerful and compelling and can support your campaign. Okay, so very, very quickly before we move on to Q&A, and network mapping. So who are the key supporters that you want to target during your campaign? And that's not just people who can donate. It might be people who can pitch for you, who can make interesting introductions for you. how are you going to reach them? So which of your connections might have links with them? So think about your colleagues, your trustees, your volunteers, your followers, the press, any partners, community groups. Who do you know that can help you reach your dream donors, your dream supporters? And what do you need from them? So it's always great to have a clear ask. So are you asking your networks for email introductions to a dream donor? Is it a coffee meeting? Do you want them to pitch to a donor on your behalf? Do you want them to share your posts or tag you on social media? What are you asking them for? And what do they need from you to support you effectively? So thinking about, is it a messaging toolkit? Is it some more clarity on how the campaign works? Is it just a clear ask, knowing what you want from them? Think about that. And a really useful tool for making sure that you're making the most of your networks and for reaching your dream donors is this network mapping tool. So network mapping, we always recommend starting with yourself. So who do you know, what spaces, what people are you connected to that you might be able to use and make the most of for your campaign? And there are lots of different areas of your life to think about. It might be work, but it might be education, it might be hobbies, and I don't know, maybe you play in a football club and you're connected to some interesting people there. Think about the different spaces that you move in. And then also think about, so your prospect might be a current donor, it might be a dream donor, it might be a lapsed donor, but map your networks and map theirs. And LinkedIn is a really good tool for that. So take a look at their profile on LinkedIn. And based on that, identify the connections. So in this hypothetical scenario, I'm Caitlin and I'm trying to reach my dream supporter, Gabby. And I've mapped my networks and I've mapped Gabby's networks, and I've realized my colleague is Gabby's friend. I've realized that my employer is somehow connected to Gabby's. I've realized that my friend Emily is friends of an influencer that Gabby follows. And so based on that, I have lots of different routes to go down to reach Gabby and get a meeting with her, make sure that I get an invite to the same events that she's invited to. I have lots of different levers to pull to begin building a relationship. And this tool is really helpful for reaching, for example, major donors where it can be hard to identify them in your networks. I might look at the people I know and think, I don't know any millionaires in my networks. But we're all only a few steps removed from everyone. So this exercise is really helpful to work out how we might reach our dream supporters. We're not going to have time to do this now, but we'll be sharing the slides, and we recommend going away and spending some time on that. Okay, very, very quickly, managing time during this campaign. If you're a small fundraising team, if you're working on a billion other projects right now, and this is in addition to what you already do, first and foremost, what actually matters? Always go back to your guiding stars, always go back to your key aims. And if activities aren't helping you get to them, then scrap them, they're not worth it. And also, this is also about sometimes when we're so overwhelmed, we spend a lot of time proofreading an email a billion times when we could just send it out and good is better than perfect. Or we become paralyzed and we don't do the big important things because we're so overwhelmed by them. But actually, if it's something that matters, then let's make sure we're making time for it. Prioritize and say no. So if it's not going to help you get towards your guiding stars, it's probably a no. Manage expectations. So be really clear with your teams about what to expect from this campaign, especially if it's the first campaign you've ever run. Manage those expectations. Communicate your needs. So do you need to be able to let some other tasks drop, to be able to prioritize this? Do you need to be able to block out focus time in your calendar? Do you need new project management tools? Communicate all of that. Prepare in advance, so you can prepare communications materials, schedule posts, begin having chats and meetings with your relationships in advance of the campaign. Leverage your assets and your networks. We've just given you a couple of tools for doing that, so please do take them away and use them. And also look after yourself and your team. So to do our best work, we also need to look after ourselves, look after each other. And that's also just like a core feminist principle. So let's make sure we're also looking after ourselves. And please do, if you have any tips for this, drop in the chat, because I know that this managing time piece is something that a lot of people struggle with. And we have a couple of tools which you'll get the slides after the session, but this is a tool where basically you ask yourself, is it urgent and is it important? If the answer to both those questions is yes, then you do it. If the answer to one of those questions is no, then you need to either schedule it for later, delegate the task, or just delete it. So this is a fun one. And then we've also included another tool, which is basically about just planning your time. So working out, what are you working on now? What's up next? What have you completed? And just being able to keep track of all the tasks you're working on. But we'll share those slides later. Okay. Want to make sure there's time for Q&A. So I think I'm going to stop sharing for now. That whistle stop tour of Strategy 101. And yeah, let us know if you have any questions in the Q&A.
Thanks, Caitlin. That was a really great presentation. Yeah, so thank you for taking your time out today to join us. And kick off with the first question that we had was, so there's a charity that's actually taken part in their 5th Big Give campaign in 2 years. Have you got any advice on how to keep supporters motivated when they've been doing match funding campaigns so frequently over the last few years? The message, I guess, for them in particular, that message of doubling donations has become maybe a bit diluted for them because they've done quite a lot of campaigns in the last few years. Yeah, is there any advice you can share there?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. Honestly, I think there's something so powerful about, to those people who have supported you over time, just making sure that they feel recognized, that they know that you appreciate how all of their support over the past 5 years of your match funding campaigns. I feel like that goes a really long way, the appreciation piece. And there are also ways to kind of think about how you want to slightly tailor your messages depending on the different audiences you're speaking to. So if you're trying to target new donors, then maybe you don't need to speak so much about the past 5 years of your Big Give journey. Equally, if you're trying to focus on repeat giving from the supporters you already have, then actually look at everything we've achieved together over the past 5 years. We'd love for you to continue supporting us. There's so much power in that message as well. So I just think about, who are your key audiences and how do you want to tailor your message in response to them? I don't know if Big Give would add anything.
I was going to just kind of reiterate a lot of what you've said, maybe thinking about, why is this campaign so important? Maybe compared to some of the other campaigns, what are you trying to achieve, particularly in this one? And what impact is that going to have on those beneficiaries? Because we always say that focusing on that impact is probably one of the most important things that you can tie into your comms messages. And maybe trying to add in the match funding incentive in a slightly different way. So thinking about, okay, what have we actually been able to achieve in those past few campaigns because of this match funding that we might not have been able to do through a different way of fundraising. So showing, yeah, this is why match funding has been so important to our organization. This is what we've been able to achieve because of the match funding, and this is what we're aiming to achieve with match funding for this campaign as well. You know, just kind of reiterating about those past successes and what your aims are, and maybe how, particularly if you're focusing on those long-term donors and trying to re-incentivize, you know, saying you supported us in this campaign, we've managed to achieve this, and just to let you know, we've got another campaign that's also got match funding. So just kind of tweaking that message slightly depending on your audience as well could be quite key.
Yeah, and maybe the cost of living is an interesting one to message around. And if you join us on Wednesday, we're going to be talking more about how to incorporate that into your messaging.
Sorry. I guess there's another question about sorry, just opening up the Q&A. Oh, quick one from Jess. Does IG have an Instagram? I don't know. I think maybe to follow back.
Yeah, we don't have an Instagram, but we do have LinkedIn, we have Twitter. I have a QR code to my LinkedIn on the presentation slides, so do connect with us. And if there's demand for an Instagram, we can explore that channel.
So we're gonna, we'll prioritize the questions more focused on Caitlin's presentation, and more the operational questions we'll probably try and answer in the Ask Us Anything webinar, just to make use of Caitlin's time here and her knowledge. So we had a question from Kasim who asked, they would be interesting to know about finding about engaging with bigger donors. I don't know, Kasim, if you could actually maybe put some more information specifically about that, if you have existing sort of high net worth donors, or if you want to engage with new ones, maybe, yeah, if you could ask us, just clarify what you mean by that, and then we can ask that to Caitlin.
Yeah, I guess some tips off the top of my head. Yeah, it's good to get some clarity on what you mean by bigger donors, because for different organizations that can mean very different things. Is it someone who can give you £100, £1,000, £1 million? So I'd think a little bit about that. And also relationships are just so important. So the cold outreach, we don't really recommend. That network mapping exercise can be really, really useful. So we always recommend, who is this dream donor that you're trying to target? Who's in your networks, who is in their networks, and where do those overlap? So you can go through your relationships to try and reach them. And we have a whole field guide about fundraising, which is really accessible. So I can send that to the Big Give for them to circulate with you afterwards, if that's helpful.
Thanks, Caitlin. That's really helpful. Beth, do you have any questions?
Yeah, there was one just saying, just very interesting on all of the different methods you use, the strategies that you put in later on. Do you know if the features are available, like all for charities, and are they all free? From what you know.
Is this about LinkedIn? So
yeah,
on LinkedIn, honestly, you can just do it with your personal LinkedIn accounts. If you already have a person in mind, look at their LinkedIn, look at, do you have any connections in common? Look at the organizations that they've worked at in the past. You know, are there any organizations you have in common? What does that tell you about their interests? What are they posting about? What events are they going to? Which sounds quite intense, but the more research that you can do to work out where your areas of overlap are, the better.
Great. There's a question actually for Beth about Big Give and what we're going to be doing to promote the campaign overall. So yeah, Beth, if you're able to share any news on that.
Yeah, so yeah, as always, Big Give do all of our promotion for the general campaign. So we'll have lots of social posts going out. We'll have a campaign video which we're aiming to launch a week before the campaign starts, and we also have a retained PR agency who are working with us to secure some potential media opportunities in like national titles and also on different media channels. So we're working hard at the moment to secure some really good marketing opportunities for this campaign, just to raise awareness about the amazing opportunity that it presents.
And Caitlin, do you have any advice on how, like, especially for sole fundraisers, about how much time they should be spending? I know you sort of touched upon that about prioritizing time, but is there any like sort of guidelines about like how many hours a week or anything like that, or is it
That's
just
a great
as
question.
much as you can?
I would say I don't think the answer is I would say work smarter, not harder. So those priorities that you have, what activities are actually going to help you to achieve what success means to you? Are you spending loads of time proofreading materials that maybe you actually only need to reread a couple of times and just send and get out there? Kind of always asking yourself what's the most important. And also, like, I think a key message that I would love for everyone to take away from this is it's not all on you. You know, even though you might be the only person with the fundraiser title at your organization, raising money is an organization-wide activity. So how are your trustees getting involved? How are your other team members supporting you with comms, with sharing with their networks? How are your volunteers contributing? Never feel like it rests entirely on you, because it doesn't and it shouldn't.
Great, thanks. And there's Beth, there's a question about going back to marketing. I don't know if you want to answer that one. About
Yeah, so essentially the question is just asking about how much Big Give can support charities to also promote their campaigns. So of course on social media, if you tag Big Give, we'll aim to reshare as many of your posts as possible during the week as well, and just raise awareness about your individual projects. So if you do tag us, particularly Twitter, is a good, well, X now actually, but yeah, if you tag us, we can reshare those posts as much as we can.
And then just to before we wrap up, I know Caitlin, there was another poll. Do you want me to just ask that poll before people leave?
Yeah, and I'd love to know, okay, super speedy, 1 minute in the chat. I'd love to know one thing that you want to commit to doing following this session. So is it you're going to complete your asset mapping exercise? Is it a target that you want to hold yourself accountable to? Just like drop really quickly in the chat. I love a bit of public accountability.
And yeah, we also have a poll about how
Yes.
you're all feeling now. So I'll also launch that so people can also answer that.
Thank you. So yeah, we'd love to hear how you're feeling now as well. So on a scale of 1 to 5, how are you feeling about campaign strategy now? So are you still not confident at all? Help, exclamation mark. Are you feeling a bit more confident but have a way to go? Are you feeling significantly better? And we do have another training session on Wednesday, so don't forget that.
Give it 10 more seconds and then I'll close the poll. Last chance. And closing it. I'll share the results. So hopefully you can all see that. So I think, yeah, people are feeling better.
We love to hear that. We're glad you're feeling a bit better. And yes, we have another session on Wednesday. So do come to that if you're interested in messaging and how to use social media, etc.
We've just, as a reminder, we have that Ask Us Anything webinar on Friday as well. So any operational related questions or any other questions, please drop in for that. We have had a few questions about Bax donations. We will be sending out an email actually this week about Bax donations and how they work. But again, if you have any follow-up questions, either pop us an email or drop into the webinar to ask us on Friday as well. But with that in mind, I think the other questions have been wrapped up. So I want to firstly thank Caitlin for joining us today and sharing her knowledge and expertise and making such an interactive webinar. I want to thank everyone else for joining us for this webinar today, being so sort of engaging and sharing your thoughts in the chat. So it's been really great to hear your sort of goals, and hopefully you can all achieve them through the campaign. And hopefully we'll see you on Wednesday for the next webinar.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. See you on Wednesday.
Thank you. Bye.